Jack Spade back here with you, High Noon Leatherworks, for another leather adventure. And on this episode, we're going to continue the Kukri Knife Sheath, and we're going to do some buckskin dyeing. So come on in, and let's get started. For the dyeing process today, as usual, I have my protective gloves. Again, I know I say this a lot in my videos, my dyeing videos, but you get that dye on your skin, it's not going to wash off. It's going to have to wear off. So we have several pieces here that we're going to dye today. And the customer requested buckskin. So I have Fibings buckskin dye, and there's not a lot in there, and I do have several pieces. So before I got ready to start this video today and do this dyeing, I checked my stash, and I do have a new bottle of buckskin dye. So just in case I run out, I've got a new bottle. I try to keep one extra bottle on hand of each color that I use. That way, if I'm doing a project and it looks like I'm going to run out, I know I'm safe. But I always double check that before I get started. So first thing I want to do is take my dye, pour it into my clear plastic container. And I've explained this several times in my past videos, but I always like to put it in a separate container. You can get several of those, or the flat trays, little tiny flat trays at Dollar Tree, and just that makes them pennies a piece, and you can just throw them away. I do not like to put dye back into my original bottle. I don't want to contaminate it, and I don't want to keep sticking my dauber down into my dye bottle and contaminate it. So that keeps my dye nice and pure, and again, it's only costing me pennies. Let me see if I can back this out just a hair. So we'll take the largest piece, which is the back, put a little bit of dye on the dauber, especially on the finished side of the leather. I like to give it a couple of coats so that it's nice and even. Maybe go at it a couple of different directions so you don't just get a streaking effect. And I try not to just absolutely soak my dauber when I do that. I want to try to get just enough on there to coat that. You'll notice it's going a lot further as I progressively put that on. Take my clean rag, and the reason I do this is because it seems to me like it evens the dye out really well when you do that. and that will lighten up. But that's the buckskin while it's wet. I'm going to go to the front piece. And the reason I'm doing the fronts first is in case I run out of dye and have to switch bottles. That way, if there is a slight difference, then you're not going to see it, because the other shade would be on the inside. So you're not going to see it anyway, but just trying to think ahead with any issues I might have. And you see me changing directions, and that is to make it look more even. And I just work that on that surface until it almost wants to lay on the surface and not soak any more up. And then that's when I'll take my rag and wipe the excess off. And what that does, again, smooths it all down and makes it very uniform in color. Now the first one that I just did, you just watched me do it, that was real time, you can see it's already lightening up. So it doesn't take very long for that to start drying. I'll go to the two spacers. This is not that critical on the finish side because you're not going to see them. They're going to be sandwiched and glued. But I want them to be dyed. I want it to look professional. I don't want anybody to be able to pull that back and look at it and say, well, somebody, whoever did this, didn't dye it properly. Now we'll go back, we'll grab the first piece, and I'll start doing my edges. I have a feeling, because of the thickness of this leather, that when I get to the point of putting my snaps on, I'll probably have to wet form that piece that folds over to make sure that it folds over properly and nice and square. If not, it may want to fight me a little bit, so that'll be something that we'll get into when we get ready to put the snaps on. That'll be a little while because we'll have to do this today, the dyeing process. Then we'll have to let that dry. Then we'll have to glue the pieces together. Then we'll have to drill it for stitching. So it'll be a process, but we'll get there. I believe it'll be a beautiful piece when it's done, and as much as I know this guy loves this knife, he's gonna love the sheath. tell you right now, with having to do the back side or the unfinished rough side of those, it's going to take all of that dye that's in that first container. So I'm going to go ahead and just pour the rest of it into my container. Do the edges, the ends, and the back of the spacers and set those aside. Because remember, I just want to make sure I get those coated and covered. They're not as critical as the front or the back. And you definitely need to make sure that you let that dye dry overnight before you try to put any glue on that, because it can affect how your glue reacts. And again, this inside is not as critical for dyeing as the outside or the finished side, but I want to make sure that I do have it coated well. The only piece that's really critical is this that folds over. That's the only piece you're going to see, because it folds over this direction and gets sewn right here, so you'll actually see that piece, just like a gun holster would be on, well, if you made it that way. Not all of them are like that. But this is a two-piece sheath, and you will see this part up here when you pop the snaps off and pull the knife out. You'll see this. So we will need just a little bit more, so I will need to open this. I'll leave the box out, and by the way, each one of these fivings dies comes with another dauber, and I'll leave the box set out on my workspace here so I know to order another buckskin. Shake it up real good. This is a perfect example of what I was talking about toward the beginning of the video, is that I ran out of dye in one container, so I'm going to have to open up in the middle of dyeing something. So remember that I told you that's the reason I was dyeing the outside first. So that way, if I had to go to the new bottle of dye, I wouldn't have to worry about it being exactly perfect. It wouldn't mess up my finished side or the outside of my project. And since this is the one that you're going to see the inside of, I'm going to make sure it's coated really well, just like the finished side is. Overlap that a little bit. Take my rag, smooth that out. And that also pushes all that grain of that unfinished leather to one direction when I do that, while that's moist like that. So we'll let that dry. And then it'll be ready to scuff. We'll scuff the edge a little bit. We'll put contact cement on it on both sides. We'll let that tack up, and then we'll actually glue those pieces together. Alright, so there's the pieces of the Kukri Knife Sheath that have been dyed buckskin in color. We'll let those set and dry at least overnight, and let them come back to that finished tint that they're going to be of that buckskin. Then we'll come back on the next video and we'll go ahead and apply the contact cement and get into marking the grooves and everything for our stitching. Thanks a lot for coming and watching. Thanks for following these series. I appreciate it. And like I always say, please like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.